Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast, the show where we uncover what really creates freedom in life and business, and we'll explore stories of those who've learned how to build wealth with purpose.
Welcome back to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast, the show where we go beyond the numbers, spreadsheets, and tax returns to talk about what really creates freedom in life and in business. Today, I'm joined by Michael Hession, founder of the Perfect Asset. He's a wealth strategist and on a mission to help every American to be debt-free and recapture control of their income. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hi, Daniel. Great to be here. It's good to see you again.
Great. Now, Michael, let's dive a little bit more tell us a little bit more of a backstory and share with us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
I'll go back a little ways. What kind of brought me to where I am now, why I'm doing what I'm doing is I started my first business a couple of years out of college when I was 24, a little manufacturing business where I made custom covers and tops for boats and boat owners. And I did it for 16 years, got really good at it, but I didn't know any better than to set it up right. I had no exit strategy. So when I just burned out, there was nothing to sell because it was all my handiwork and my expertise. And right around that time, my wife and we got our first home, which was a two-family. So I started to learn about leverage. And then eventually I got into trading in the markets and understanding how money flows and just that, you have to have leverage in your life in some way, shape, or form. And I think trading in the markets and seeing how it's kind of rigged. It's kind of like Vegas, in my opinion. Like the house usually wins Wall Street,
Yeah.
and I didn't like that part. So eventually, I got into a very particular type of whole life insurance contract where you just have much more control and certainty around the growth of your money and access to it. So that's like the very short, condensed version of it. And I guess one thing I will say is that my wife and I got really whacked in 2008. Actually, went through bankruptcy, and
Oh, wow.
part of it was, we had some real estate, we had some stuff going on, but our foundation wasn't strong enough to withstand that. So one of my motivations is to help people set that up so their foundation is so solid that when things go squirrely, which they do, that you don't get knocked out and you have a strong foundation to not just withstand those challenging times, but also have liquidity and money reserve to take advantage of opportunities. If that makes sense. So
Yeah. No, that makes completely sense. And,
yeah,
and I love what you just said. You had a business, but I say something to a lot of advisors. I said, listen, all financial advisors are accidental business owners. And I feel like often what happens to a lot of business owners, they are accidental business owners because they can go and build everything. But when you look at the definition of business, it really is an entity that can run on its own without the owner.
yeah,
Unfortunately, I hear the story a lot from a lot of business owners where they kind of, instead of building a house that's got doors, right, an exit strategy, and it's got some windows,
yeah,
instead, at the end of the day, they build a chimney. There's like no way out, and the only way to get out, and it sounds
right,
like that's what happened to you. It's like,
yeah,
okay, the only way I can get out, where I've got to go and basically break down the whole business because there is no
yeah, and
business because
just
I am the
walk away,
business.
from it,
Walk away
basically.
from it.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, which is unfortunate, but that happens, that happens quite often. And you kind of brought up another point too, that kind of the financial industry or the traditional advising, and that's what we're trying to kind of mitigate too, is really built on a lot of things and a lot of theories, and often there is not a really solid foundation. And the story that you shared, I'm sure a lot of people can identify with what happened in 2008, where you're feeling like on paper, everything looks great, and then the rug is pulled down underneath you, and everything kind of falls down because there wasn't really a strong foundation
yeah,
that was kind of built there.
yeah. When you're dependent upon, cheap lending and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff, and that goes away, and the banks stop lending, you're like, what do you do? Where do you get that cash flow? So yeah, yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So you're building a quite strong brand around challenging kind of the status quo of just kind of talking about right now. So
Mhm.
what is really at the core message or belief that really drives your mission?
It's funny. One of the things I run across a lot is that people they'll conflate what I do and what I teach with infinite banking and using whole life insurance is it's not an investment. If
Mm,
people they'll view it as an investment, it's not. It's more if you when you think of it as a savings and liquidity, structure or set of vehicles, that's really what it is. Now it allows you to do all these other things, but I think it's one of the biggest things that I see people, they go, oh, whole life is the worst investment. Well, it's not an investment.
Yeah.
You're calling it the wrong thing. It's about savings and liquidity and access to capital. So that's, to me, that's one of the things. Just there's a lot of education involved, just to let people know that these things they are a unique and tried and true asset that been around for almost 200 years in the U.S. And so they have a track record of just, it was like the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise and the hare. It's like keeps
Yeah.
doing its thing, and the hare is like going all crazy and getting tired, and the tortoise just keeps going.
Just keep
And
going.
you can set up your own tortoise to tap into ongoingly. You put you in great
Yeah.
shape, and really provides a real peace of mind. I've been doing it for myself and my family for about 12 years now, and it is nice knowing that when things are going crazy in the stock market, I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
not
It
being
doesn't.
affected by it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I think it's the whole idea of the structuring. And again, what I'm hearing you say, it's kind of like, double purposing your money. And that's really what it comes down to. Maybe triple or quadruple purposing your
Yeah.
money, right? And I think that's
And
where really
taking
the
the
power.
banking function, people don't think about operating like a bank for themselves or a banker. And that's why Nelson wrote this book behind me, Becoming Your Own Banker. No one thinks about it because that's what the banks do. But if you can start to take that function over for yourself, for your family, for your business, it's just, my goodness, the benefits that come from that are just tremendous. And it's a different way of looking at it. So you have
Yeah.
to, you know, you have
And
to,
and this is where I think the confusion sometimes comes because people don't understand. This is sometimes where 2 plus 4 actually equals 10 because you're compounding things in a different way
yeah.
than traditional, addition. And I think this is kind of where people are a little bit afraid of it. But I think
Mhm.
also what you mentioned that people comparing an investment to this, well, no, because there's different purposes for it and how it works. So you're not really comparing apples to apples,
Yeah.
right?
And because of the way they're structured, I like to call them the and asset. And you can have these policies and invest in real estate and invest in the stock market and invest in crypto. It doesn't work the other way around, because in investments, you're you're intentionally putting money away that you can't touch, hoping for a return. This is
Mm.
the complete opposite of it. You're putting in money into this vehicle that you can access ongoingly. So they're just very different things. And
Yeah. Well, you talk about and just mentioned that about helping your clients to transform, their debt into wealth.
mm,
What does that actually, what does that look like in someone's, real life or using a real situation?
yeah, great question. One of my favorite examples is what my wife and I did is when we first got our first policy 12 years ago, we had some high interest credit card debt. So what we did is we started the policy, we had cash value, that's what you tap into to do whatever you want to do with it from your policy. And we took a loan from the insurance company. That's that's the best way to do it, to access that capital. And we just, paid off that higher interest credit card debt. And because we didn't just pay cash for it, if you paid cash to pay down that debt, yes, the debt would be down and we could jack up those cards again, but the money's gone other than that. And there's no asset, there's nothing. But when we go through the policy first, then we get to use it again. You mentioned you start to use the same dollar over and over again. But one of my favorite, I have a client who had a vehicle, 5 years left on a truck, and she's paying not too much, $350 a month for it or something, and she didn't have any other debt, and she is also a crypto trader. So the first time she accessed her policy was to buy more crypto when there was a dip in the market. So she did that, and she paid the loan back to the company, which then refilled the shelves, so she could use that money again. And then she told me about this vehicle and said, well, it's I'm paying $350 a month. There's no interest though, so I'm okay with it. And I said, well, that's great. And that's $350 a month for another 4 or 5 years that you're never going to see again, right?
Hmm.
She's not like she can tell the vehicle at a profit. It doesn't work that way. So what she did was she took a loan from her policy, bought the car, and then took over the role of lender, and had $350. And instead of going to an outside lender, regardless of whether it was interest or not, interest free, is coming back into her system. So it's, over a period of what she would have, just $6,000 would have gone elsewhere. It's now back in her system to be used again for whatever she wants. So that's really a very simple example of, actually buying her own debt and then assuming, taking the payments, but for
Yeah.
herself rather than someone else.
Again, this is what it comes down to with,
Yeah.
the whole idea of being your own bank. Like right now, if somebody goes and deposited $1,000 in there, what the bank does, it goes and borrows $10,000 out.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're recapturing some of that, some of that money back and giving it a double purpose. So
Yeah.
who are the typical clients that you find, most often that you're working with right now?
It's mostly entrepreneurs, small business owners, and investors, because I think they tend to be a little more savvy when it comes to the money game, and
Mm.
they tend to be keeping a closer eye on things. I have some clients who are they're still employees, but they tend to be thinking outside the box, and a lot, actually, pretty much all of them, they do have some. They might be also crypto traders, or they might have like a real estate property or two. So they like the idea of they know they need more than just a job. They need some kind of leverage, and this can be a great vehicle. But this tends to be those categories: small business owner, entrepreneur, and investors typically. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So what do you see kind of the biggest financial blind spot that most people, have that's really holding them back?
Um, when it comes to what I focus on with these whole life insurance contracts is one of the biggest challenges is, aside from just having them get that it's not an investment and it's its own unique asset, but also to think of, really, when you think about what, and throughout someone's working life, really the biggest asset they have is the amount of income they earn over time,
Hmm.
right? Really, over time. That's their single biggest. I know the housing industry likes to call it your home, but that's not true. It's the income that you make over a 30, 40-year period. It can be a lot of money. So where do you keep that money as you're making it? Is it, typically it's just sitting in a bank somewhere? A lot of times they'll think, well, if I'm, how expensive is this policy? And I'm like, you have to think about it as a deposit. Really, yes, you're paying premiums and you're purchasing a death benefit, but really what it is you're depositing money into this safe, private, guaranteed contract that you can use ongoingly until your time comes, right? So I think viewing it differently, as not as an expense, because most people think about life insurance, get the highest death benefit, pay the least amount of premium. We want to flip that around completely. You want to put as much as you can into these things, and you don't worry about the death benefit so much, because that will grow over time. But so that's another like way of thinking that can be a challenge to get people to understand that, because it's just they grew up thinking a certain way. So
Yeah. Well, you bring a great point. I think a lot of people, what they don't realize, you said something that kind of caused me to become a recovering CFP. After I'd done my CFP, I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. And in there, Robert Kiyosaki talks about the whole idea that my house is not the biggest asset, it's the biggest liability.
yep,
That kind of shift my whole thinking, how I have gone and looked at all that.
yeah,
But you really bring out a great point that, when people are looking at what and how they're doing things, they're not always the way that they believe they are, right? And
yeah,
and this is where I think a lot of people kind of leave a lot of money on the table because they don't fully understand what the options are and what they're actually able to, what they're able to do. So,
yeah.
you mentioned that the financial system has been kind of rigged, and again, we're not picking on anybody. We're just kind of exposing some of the things that are so, and letting people to kind of make the decision. But it is kind of rigged to, keep people disempowered. What did you specifically mean by that?
I, well, when I said rigged earlier, I was thinking more when I was trading in the markets, options and futures and that kind of thing, and certain, like, well, this is before hedge funds were all the rage. It was, like investment banks and that kind of thing. They would get information before someone like myself, like a split second before, like an announcement or something, or some government announcement that was going to move the market. They'd find out about before me. I would say so. That was my specific to that. But as far as, not so much rigged, it's more that, I like to put it this way: you have these institutions that, Wall Street, the big banks, the government, that, kind of, run the show in the US. And they're not bad people. It's just they're part of institutions that in essence they've kind of taken over for what we used to have kings and whatnot, right? And monarchy. So they've sort of displaced and now are like the ruling class. And when you think about it, their main function is to keep it going because they've got a pretty sweet deal. You think about what the banks, they have a tremendous amount of power. There's a really interesting book if you haven't read it called The Pirates of Manhattan, and it talks about how over time, what usually when events happen, things go sideways, how the banks are able to get like legislation passed that benefits them. Like they're able to sell life insurance now, and all these other things. So it's more that, and it's again not about the individuals, it's the institutions. They're
It's the
really
system.
designed
I
to
think,
keep things going for
yeah.
themselves because they have a sweet deal. And if you recognize that, if you're part of that system, if you're Jamie Dimon of Chase or whatever he's with, he likes to keep things as they are. He's got a nice deal. He's a multi-bajillionaire. But for the rest of us, you have to recognize that that's what's so, and look at doing alternative things for ourselves and our family and our business. And they're available. There are things out there that you can do that don't just fit that cookie cutter mold that they tell you to do.
Well, that's when I mentioned when I got out of and now call myself recovering CFP, what I started to realize after that the financial industry, in my view, was kind of rigged in a way where they didn't teach me how to sell and help clients. It was more or less educating me how to sell more of their products,
Yep.
right? And
Yeah.
and that's really what it comes down to. That was one of the reasons too why I got out of the industry because I started to realize that going like, hey, I don't want to be part of it. I don't want anything to do with it. And now I'm back kind of helping advisors again, keeping them that education and showing them that there are more alternatives. And I think the
Mhm.
whole idea even of retirement and 401k plans and all of that stuff, it's still it's a failed experiment. And I mean the godfather of 401ks, he himself have gone and said that it's not didn't turn out quite the way that he thought. It was a good idea, but it doesn't work, or it has been turned into something that is actually more harmful to
Right.
individuals because most
Right.
people don't realize if right now they have $1 million in 401k, they will probably pay more than $1 million in taxes.
Yep.
And when you start calculating and going, hold on, I didn't get $1 million back on taxes when I put money in, but I'm going to pay more than 1 million. And hold on, how does it all work? And again, all we're asking, and I think this is what I'm hearing you to do. Hey, how can we go and take people and educate them that there are other ways of doing this? And a lot of the guests that we're talking about are like, hey, we're not selling anything to anyone. We're just educating them. And if it makes sense, let's have a little bit deeper conversation because it might
Exactly.
actually be more specific to your situation. And you kind of mentioned, Dave Ramsey from that perspective.
Mhm.
You know what? He does what he does. But again, if you go and take an advice from somebody that's more of an entertainer as opposed to an educator, you
Mhm.
again got to go and take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. And you also brought
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
institutions. Often, a lot of institutions, banks actually hold insurance as part of their portfolio and part of their investment, but they're not selling it because they want to
Billions of
keep it for
dollars worth.
themselves.
You know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Billions of dollars worth. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, do what they do, not what they tell you to do.
What they tell you to do. Exactly. And that's really what it comes down to. And again, that's kind of what we're doing here on the podcast
Right.
and where we are at. So, and I think a lot of financial advice out there seems to feel, complicated and overwhelming. How do you kind of go and keep things simple for someone?
Um, it's it really is. It's. You probably read Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, but you're certainly familiar with it. It really is. It's not that complicated. It's when you think of controlling having more control of your money. And what he is very early in his book, he says something really brilliant. He says that the solution that this solves is if you think about it, you finance everything in life,
Hmm.
other than maybe an occasional barter here and there. But for the most part, you finance either you save up with your income and you pay for your stuff, whatever, education, car, house, utilities, food, everything, and then you lose the ability for that money to earn any interest, right? Or to get the stuff you need, you borrow from an outside lender and you pay them interest to have the stuff in your life. So in both cases, you're that money you're spending has no ability to earn any money. And that's a real problem. it's something like 34 cents of every dollar spent in the US goes to outside interest. So
Mm.
more than a third of every buck that you spend on average just goes to satisfy interest. And this solves that problem once you understand and start to implement it. And it's so I try to keep it simple and say, look, it's really about I like to try to have people understand that there is a banking function, how the banks benefit from it, and that you can benefit from that too. And then other little pieces of it, people really like the privacy of it, or, I have lots of clients, especially in the entrepreneurial world or small business world, who have had bad experiences trying to get money from banks. So they have like a built-in like, oh, the banks, got to make me do this and this and this. So, it's having a series of conversations. I have a lot of resources available to, I'm partnered with a firm out of Arizona called Factum Financial, and we have a lot of educational, short videos just to so people can start to unwind and start to, oh, okay, that's what that is. So it's a process,
Yeah.
but it's really like I would never take a client on unless they really understood it and they really want to do it, because otherwise you're better off just giving your money to somebody and hope for the best. You
Yeah,
know?
it's not about convincing somebody. It's giving the options, and if it makes sense,
Yeah,
hey, let's go and move forward, right? And again, every
exactly. Yeah,
situation is a little bit different, what and how somebody's using it,
yeah,
and it's a matter of just, having that conversation, introducing the concept. Hey, if this makes sense,
yeah.
then maybe you can go and move forward. So,
Right,
uh,
right.
so when it comes down to kind of what you've seen and the people that you've talked to, what do you kind of wish that more people knew about how money really works? Like, is there a specific thing that would be really helpful for somebody to kind of start on this journey?
I would say read this book. I know people don't read that much anymore, but it's a great place to start. This book is brilliant because um, the first part of it, he talks a lot about human nature. Nelson does in his book, and different laws of human nature, and how you really have to, in a lot of ways, overcome some of those things, some of those natural ways of, he calls it arrival syndrome, where you feel like you've reached a certain financial level and you've arrived, or you've reached a certain knowledge level. It's like you were saying before, like financial advisors, you can only teach what you're taught. So if they're taught that the way to do things is to get your securities license and take assets under management, that's how you make your money, and you stop there and don't learn any more, then there's not much more room for for beyond that. So he touches a lot about how you really have to overcome some sort of basic human tendencies if you want to succeed at the money game. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a great place to start, is just to educate yourself and be open to um, and not be intimidated by it. As you know, a lot of people are intimidated by finances and money and all these kinds of things, and it's almost like a taboo. It shouldn't be. People should be able to openly talk about it, like what they're making, and how it tends to be this kind of hush hush thing. We're not taught about it in school. So
Yeah.
I think education is so important, having conversations and being open to learning about it, because it's really, this is fascinating too. And it
Well,
really is kind of a game that can be won and played and won.
well, I think it seems complicated because it's new to somebody, and anything
Yeah.
new always seems like, and again, we don't want to get too much philosophical how our brain works and all that stuff, but anything new to a human being is a threat, right? It's going to kill me, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
new until we get familiar with it. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't a threat. So I think there is that resistance to that. But I
Yeah.
think that's a great advice, is just start learning about it, be open-minded, and
Yep.
start experimenting. I think really the greatest way to live is to actually experiment and fail as often as you possibly can, because that's the only way we learn.
Right.
I often say that if we, you know, if we the way that we behave as adults, if we were behaving like that when we were learning walk, we all would be crawling around right now. Nobody would be walking because we would have given up. Because in order for somebody to, for us, we
Oh,
all
that's so
learn how to
true.
walk. It was literally thousands of times landing on our butt, on our face, on our side, whatever, until we kind of got that, oh yeah, these two things can move together in conjunction. Oh, okay. But
Yep.
getting to that point, it was quite painful. But we had that motivation because we looked at our parents and we were modeling them. Hey, look at those two things. They're walking around. I guess I can do that too
Right, right.
as we
And
grow
then
up.
kind of like, and then in some, again, not to make anyone wrong, but then like the system is kind of rigged like through, for people just to be very sedentary and just like watch stuff,
Yeah.
hours of Netflix or whatever, hours spent scrolling on your phone. That's great for Apple and for Netflix and stuff, but it doesn't really move the needle forward. So it's kind of touching on what we talked before about like more like on the money side of things. These systems are they're great and they're convenient, but they don't really allow for growth, and
Yeah.
a process of improvement. And so you have to kind of be aware of that and be willing to like say no, I'm not going to do this thing just because that's what everybody does. I'm thankful that my girls were a little bit young before the onset of the smartphone. They're already a little bit older. I
Yeah.
just it just, it's again, it's a great tool, but it doesn't really, it doesn't, you're not learning something new or tangible. You're viewing stuff. So you have to kind of fight against that as well. To me,
Yeah.
that's what I see as an
Well,
old.
you got to figure out, and I think, what the infinite banking actually fits into this very well. Don't become a consumer, become a creator.
Yes.
I think this is kind of when I'm thinking about the infinite banking. That's really what it is, right? Hey, you're not the consumer of the bank. You actually become the creator of your own bank and
Yep.
what you can do with it. And it actually serves you much better than
Yep.
just being there consuming stuff. And I think this is the challenge where a lot of people are there just scrolling social media and watching stuff, just
Yeah.
kind of wasting time in,
Right.
in certain aspect of that, right? And again, there are businesses that thrive on that, but you got to look at what kind of works for you and what's,
Right.
what's important, right?
Yeah, and then once you start it, I have clients who until they get their policies, they get the concept, they like the idea behind it, but it wasn't until they started to really exercise that muscle, like the woman I mentioned before, when she bought her vehicle and saw that, oh, I'm acting like a banker now. I'm operating like a banker, and it became more real to her. So it's if you think anything of value, think of like you mentioned before, learning how to crawl then work. That's a process that was certainly worth doing. And you think of really of anything of value, whether it's a relationship or a skill. I'm a musician. I've been playing guitar for like 40 years now, and it's been a process and is so worth it. This is a similar kind of thing. It's a process. Things that are really worthwhile, it takes something, and it,
It
it's
takes
it's
time.
it's so worth it. But and like if you kind of walk into that going in, then you understand that it takes a bit and takes a process to learning. There's a learning curve, but it's so worth it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned being anti-debt, but also pro-leverage when it's done right. How do you kind of help people to reframe that? Because I think often people that kind of get those things a little bit mixed up.
Yeah, it happens. Usually what I try to do is when my clients get started, we'll have, it's very much a relationship. Just it's not like a set it and forget it. I have a few clients who don't really feel like they need to be in touch with me, a lot. But I prefer to, at least, you know, let me know when things are coming up, or let's have like quarterly reviews, just so, you got something you're thinking about doing, like, oh, maybe we could utilize your policy. So let's stay in touch and make sure that because you can mess these things up if
Mm.
there's even they're set up correctly, these policies, and you take big loans out and you can mess it up and you can cause yourself a tax situation if you don't do it the right way. So it's that's partly my job is to kind of guide them and say, let's yes, this makes sense. No, you don't really need to take a loan out. In this particular case, it might be better if you just to pay for that thing out of pocket. So you just want to be, it needs to be managed and nurtured and cared for. So um, it's the nice thing is they're so flexible, these policies, and as you probably know, the loans when you take out are unstructured, so you make the terms. It's not like
Mhm.
these companies put you on a payment plan. It's just so there's that can be dangerous for some people. So you just you want to be disciplined about it. It works best, as Nelson would say, to be an honest banker for yourself. Once you get started on this, just treat it very, in just a disciplined manner because you'll it'll benefit you in the long run. But
Yeah.
so you have to I that's partly my job is to be there, along for the ride the whole time.
Yeah. Now you're fairly strong advocate for the financial literacy part of it. Why do you kind of believe that education, not just strategy, is such a vital vital part of the work that you do?
It's just like you said, you can't convince someone, and it's not a. I like to say this with my clients. I always say this. I say, look, really, what we're looking at doing is you're going to be starting your own financing business
Hmm.
by the use of these policies. So that just by that simple definition and that, because that's really what it is. It's different than just buying a whole life insurance policy, paying premiums for it, and forgetting about it, which most people do when they buy a typical life insurance policy. It's I'll review them sometimes, and it's shocking what
Yeah.
people they'll go, "Oh, I have a whole life," and they'll look at it and they go, "No, it's an accidental death and dismemberment policy that it doesn't do anything unless you die accidentally or become
Yeah.
dismembered." People just said it. This is not that. So, it's by its very nature, there's education involved and there's learning involved. Like I said before, if someone's not willing to do that, they're not a good candidate, and we'll just we'll shake hands and part friends. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
takes
no, that's a great point.
yeah.
It's being informed, and there's unfortunately a lot of people that are misinformed about what they think about what they have.
Yeah.
Can you share a client story that really kind of sticks with you because of the transformation, and it kind of reminds you of, why you do what you do?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories is I have a client who has been with me for I guess about 5 years now, and he's a very successful surgeon, veterinarian surgeon. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but he operates on animals up in the Chicago area, and he super busy guy. One of those guys is up at 4:30 in the morning,
Mm.
gets home at 8, and he trusted me, liked the idea of having his own banking system, but he didn't really want to go much beyond that, like really learning it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll do the best I can, and let's go ahead and get started. So he was paying about $50,000 a year in premium towards the policy. He didn't have any debt, so there wasn't an obvious debt strategy, and there was really nothing to do other than just pay the first couple of years of premium and then have the thing grow as it grows guaranteed. And but then heading into the third year, because typically how my clients do is ideally you pay for them on an annual basis
Mm.
because you want to get that money in there right away so it can start to grow and compound. So that's
Yeah.
ideally the way. So you think about you pay these things at the beginning of the year's time. So year two, you're paying at the beginning of the second year. So he was getting ready to pay for his third premium, $50,000. He had a business opportunity come up where he could buy a kennel or a boarding facility
Mm.
for dogs and cats that was like fully set up, like 20 employees, really cash flow positive, and need about $100,000 to close the deal, and there was a time limit on it. It was about a week away, and the bank said, "Go screw! You're not getting anything more from us." And
Yeah.
he tried, and so he was kind of up against it. And he called me in a bit of a panic, and he said, "Look, I know I have this $50,000 premium come due, and I also need to come up with $100,000, a little over that, to close this deal. What should I do?" And I just took a look and I said, "Pay the premium and we'll expedite. You'll have enough cash value in your policies that actually grown better than we thought." He'd only put in 90,000 of that 50,000 over 3 years went into what's called the cash value.
Yeah.
But there was like almost 120 available. So the thing had grown in 2.5 years time, where there was like an extra 20,000 bucks in there just from the growth and the dividends helping the whole thing grow. So he called him up, took a loan, they expedited it. 2 days later, that 100 grand was in his account, closed the deal on the business, and he had this thing. It was really what Walt Disney did
Yeah.
back when he funded his first theme park. Banks told him to go screw. He realized he had all his cash value, and I just love that. He was just able to operate like his own banking system. So now he has this great business that's up and running, and he can refurbish and refill his bank for the next time he needs to use that money. I love that
Yeah.
because he wasn't really an entrepreneur before that. He was a successful surgeon, but now he like stepped into this new role as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur and business owner. And this thing is now, which started out as just like a savings vehicle, is now
Yeah.
funding his his entrepreneurial efforts. So I love that story.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's a great story, and again, illustrate with the power of this, and again, gives you options. That's really what it comes down to. And
Yeah.
again, this is kind of why you called the name of your company, I think, the perfect asset, right? So what is next for you and for your company? Anything new and exciting that you're kind of working on right now?
Oh yeah, I've got lots of stuff going on. I have my own business, and I've been doing a lot of outreach and on LinkedIn over the years. I've got an ebook and a YouTube channel, which I need to reactivate again. But I've made some connection recently in the investor space, and some people who were um, foreign nationals who own businesses in the U.S. and they're high net worth individuals, and we're looking at doing some, basically some policies for them where they can hold, these are larger amounts of cash where they can just, have a place to, they get life insurance. In this case, this woman I'm speaking to has 3 kids, and it's just like a whole nother level of people who, they're doing really well and are up to really big things, and just, being able to teach them about another place, another asset that they can use to support what they're up to in the world. And so it's just really exciting. And then with my partnership with Factum Financial, they have a partnership with something called the Keller Williams Wealth Community.
Mm,
Keller Williams is a big real estate firm. They have this thing called the KW Wealth Community, which is all about teaching their brokers and agents not how just to sell more houses, but how to grow and maintain their own wealth for their families and their business. And whole life has always been a big piece of that for KW. So Factum has exclusive rights to teach the KW wealth community about infinite banking and whole life. So that's in its early stages. I'm really excited because I think that will give us the opportunity to get this out to more people
yeah,
through KW, through that partnership. So
yeah,
that's I'm really excited about that.
yeah.
Just
No,
my whole
that
thing
sounds
is
like
the more people need to know about this. It's
yeah.
really
No,
plain.
that sounds like really an exciting project that you're working on.
Yeah.
So listen, as we kind of coming down to the close, let's shift gears a little bit. There's 4 questions I'm going to ask you. They're pretty well quick answers, whatever kind of comes to first to your mind.
Okay.
Just kind of going to answer it.
Okay.
Favorite book that shaped your thinking?
Ah, I'd probably have to go Rich Dad Poor Dad, the first
Mm,
one. That really made a big difference. And then the one after the with the 4 quadrants,
yeah,
So those are on the business side of things, and for an entrepreneurial side of things.
yeah.
Um, Fiction, I'd probably have to go with Dune, Frank
Mm,
Herbert's Dune, the first, which has economic stuff in it and really interesting, almost geopolitical things in it too. So that's the first, what comes to
yeah,
mind first. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's great. Morning routine or habit that you can live without?
I love a good cup of coffee. And I would say daily, I have 2 dogs, and 3 or 4 days a week, I take them out into the woods nearby off leash. And I do a pretty regular yoga too. And as I'm getting older, I'm 61 now, that's being flexible and keeping my
Yeah,
flexibility and stuff is really important too.
yeah.
So
Being functional becomes more and more important the older you get.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's
you gotta, it doesn't just happen with, rolling out of bed.
yeah,
When you get older, you have to work out of the bed. So,
yeah,
and my guitar, obviously, playing my
yeah,
guitar and practicing. So,
yeah. So one bucket list item that you have not done yet.
it's funny. We're going to Machu Picchu next May, my wife and
Mm,
I, and we're going to do the Inca Trail. So that was kind of on that list. Um, I've always wanted, I'm an old sailor too. I've always wanted to sail around the Horn or the Horn of South America. No, yeah, Cape of
Horn
Good,
of Africa.
the
No, I
Horn of
think they
Africa.
call it the Horn of Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, the tip of South America,
Yeah.
Cape, what's it called? Anyways, that in a big like tall ship. That would,
Yeah.
I don't know, they still even have tall ships, but that would be really cool because that's supposed to be like really hard to do. So I'll put that one down on a tall ship going around the Cape at the tip of South America,
Yeah.
Patagonia. So.
Yeah. No, no, that sounds really that sounds really interesting. So you kind of mentioned a hobby that you have playing the guitar, but is there another hobby or interest that really recharges you?
Oh, I mean, it's funny. When I'm doing it and traveling, sometimes the travel in the planes and stuff can be a pain, but it is really fun traveling. We were in Tuscany last month.
Mm.
I'd never been there before. And, we got the Machu Picchu trip coming up, and went to Cartagena in South America earlier in the summer. And those weren't really bucket lists. They kind of came up, and we're able to write them off as business trips because there were retreats involved in them.
Mm-hmm.
So traveling is really, it's just nothing like it. And the plane can be and the flights can be a pain, but once you're there in some of these places and meeting new people, and I really love traveling.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that's great. So here's the last question. I call it the hot one.
okay.
Fast forward to the end of your life and imagine everyone forgot everything you ever taught them or you showed them to do. But they do remember one important message. What would that one important message be?
If they learn from me,
Yeah.
I would say goes more to the spiritual side of things. Always choose love over fear
Hmm. Yeah.
in
No,
every
that's
situation.
great. Yeah,
In
that's a
every
great
situation.
message.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Wow, what a powerful and insightful and really perspective shifting conversation, Michael. Thank you for sharing your journey, your frameworks and how you operate and really your heart. Where can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, my website is theperfectasset.com. You can go there, and I think I've got booking links on there and my phone number and whatnot. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. Michael R. Hession, and yeah, I'm happy to chat and connect with people. So those are two good places to get a hold of me.
No, that's great. So if you're listening, be sure to check out Michael's website and his social media and the tools and things that he has created to really design a meaningful retirement and really build that your own bank, which is all part of that, a life that really you can go and live on your own terms.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you again for your time and your message. And remember, making life less taxing isn't just about money. It's about freedom, clarity, and purpose. Keep building wealth, keep protecting your legacy, and keep living the untaxable lifestyle. We'll see you next time on the Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Thank you again,
Thanks, Andy.
Michael.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Be sure to check out our other top advisor interviews at makelifelsesstaxingpodcast.com